And Dr. Arciero, as you can see by his bio, is eminently qualified to talk about his topic. He is currently professor in the School of Health Sciences in the Department of Nutrition at Sage Colleges in New York. And he is coming to us sort of live. Scott and his team videoed them. And so this has been prepared just for this audience.
Hi, welcome everybody. Very excited to speak to all of you today on this topic of optimal health and performance. Dr. Paul Arciero, as you see from the professor, I'm a professor of health and human physiological sciences and the director of the Human Nutrition and Metabolism Laboratory at Skidmore College. I want to first start because there's always so much interest, first of all, in anything related to our health. And sometimes that information is not as eloquent, is not as sophisticated, is not as valid as it should be. So I'd like to start with just defining what this research is that I'm presenting to you today. And it's human clinical trial intervention research. And it's derived from funding from multiple different sources. I think sometimes there's also a triaging of different types of funding that we all receive as scientists who are third-party independent scientists at universities. So it can come from the government, it can come from philanthropic organizations, or from private industry. There's also a set of ethical standards that we all have to abide by, and this places the science at the level of peer-reviewed, and it has to undergo much scrutiny and careful attention to its scientific integrity and ethical nature. And then there's the peer-reviewed process itself. So all of those things have to occur first, and then the peer-reviewed process, which is the gold standard of scientific research, where we conduct our research, we obtain the funding, we pass all the governing bodies. And then once we collect the data and analyze it and present it, and then write it up for publication, we need to have it reviewed by the experts from around the world. And that's the peer-reviewed process. And it goes through a number of different steps in order for it to be peer-reviewed. And then it's rank ordered depending upon the impact factor of the journal itself. And finally, I discussed this no first right of refusal because there's some research that's conducted that the grant funding agencies are allowed to refuse the publication of the data. That's the first right of refusal, the grant funding agency. And I want you to know that none of this research that I'm presenting today has allowed the grant funding agency to determine whether or not the data is able to be published. I have complete control over that, as well as the experts in the world. And that just elevates the validity and the ethical nature of the data. So here are a few of the journals where this data that I'm presenting to you today is published, and you see that here in front of you. So let's dive into the topic at hand today, and that's really longevity. It's the antithesis of aging. Longevity is not aging. When we think of longevity, we think of health span, we think of optimal health, vitality. We think of life lived at its highest potential. Aging, on the other hand, is the opposite of longevity. It's the opposite of health span. We sometimes define aging by the term lifespan. So lifespan is often associated with aging. So right now, in at least the United States, we have a fairly strong, large difference in our lifespan and health span. And what that means is that we're living a lifespan of many more years than we're actually living with health span or longevity. So we have to close that gap. And what that means is we're having a lot more people live longer that are living with much more disease. They're living with the diseases of aging. So we need to shorten that gap. We need to allow more people to live a lifespan with health. So we need their health span to increase and match their lifespan. So let's take a look at this a little bit closer, a little bit maybe deeper dive into what we are really talking about when it comes to aging. Well, there's 5 diseases of aging. One is metabolic disease, and we're maybe familiar with this. It's diabetes is the number one disease of metabolic disease. Many people are afflicted with it and suffer. Next would be heart disease. We hear a lot of headline news surrounding heart disease. It's the next disease of aging. So those are the two big ones. And then the other three that I'll discuss are also growing, unfortunately, in prevalence. And this next one, the third one, is neurocognitive disease. That would be things where we are losing brain health, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. And so more and more of us, and even psychological diseases and conditions of the brain, things that are more psychologically based, such as depression, anxiety, loneliness, and those types of things. And then we get into some of the inflammatory toxicity diseases, most notably, of course, which is cancer. And then finally, the fifth disease of aging is something we refer to as musculoskeletal diseases. That would be things like low back pain, osteoarthritis, normal weight obesity, osteoporosis, loss of bone mineral density, and osteosarcopenia, which is the loss of bone and muscle mass. So if you look at the screen right now, this pretty much captures just about every disease that we encounter as we age. There's not many that we've left out. And this is what we need to circumvent. This is what we need to begin to change so that we can address these diseases of aging that are shortening our lifespan, but at the same time, we're developing medical strategies and interventions to allow people to live longer with these diseases, but very unhealthy. So that's the research that I do. I try to bridge that gap. I try to provide people lifestyle strategies that allow them to optimize their health span. So that's what this talk is all about today. How can we optimize our health span to get us closer to our lifespan and avoid those 5 diseases of aging? So what I focus on is the concept of something called metabolism. I think it's fairly well known what metabolism is. Most people would define it as, how we burn calories, and that's true. And so here, what you have in front of you are really the 1, 2, 3, 4 components of our metabolism, the rate at which we burn calories. So very simply, it's comprised of these 4 components. One is resting. It's what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting in my chair, talking with all of you. It's what we do at night when we go to bed and sleep. It's what we do when we sit in a car, when we sit at our desk, when we sit just relaxing, watching TV. So all of these conditions of living that keep us at rest is our resting metabolism. It comprises our largest. Despite how active you might think you are, there's no doubt that the vast majority of what we do during the day is resting. And then we have exercise metabolism, where we burn calories through movement. We also burn calories through consumption of various food substances, including drinks that are, in some cases, caffeinated. And then we have what's called non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, NEAT, that we just abbreviate non-exercise activity. And that would be things like fidgeting. So when we fidget, when we get up and move around spontaneously, all those movements that we do that are somewhat unstructured during the day is what we call the non-exercise activity, and that's a component of our metabolism as well. So I focus on metabolism because it impacts nearly all aspects of the 5 diseases of aging. There's no debate about this. It's extremely well accepted that our metabolism determines our existence and prevalence for those diseases of aging. So what determines our metabolism? Well, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. It's our lean body mass. It's things like our vital organs, our heart, as you can imagine. That's a component of our lean body mass that determines our metabolism. Our muscles are another one. Our lungs, our respiratory system, the bones, the muscles. Our brain is a massive determinant of our metabolism as a component of our lean body mass. And then we have things like our age, our physical activity and exercise level, hormones that we have circulating, and then our sex, our gender, male, female. So the question that I hope all of you are now thinking about as I discussed and presented what I have thus far is, what are the best lifestyle strategies? Well, let's dive into how we can optimize our lean body mass, which then determines our metabolism, which then determines our risk and our prevalence for those 5 diseases of aging. And how can we minimize, mitigate, blunt our risk for those 5 diseases of aging? I know you're all sitting on the edge of your seats because this is valuable information. This is what is going to allow all of you to bridge the gap between our health span and our lifespan. There's no greater gift that we can be given than reducing that gap between health span and lifespan, the diseases of aging. And here are the 4 guidelines. So if there's any slide that you take a screenshot of or a picture of, encouraging you to do so. This is the slide right here. What me and my team have created through this 4 decades of scientific peer-reviewed research is perhaps the single most important lifestyle variable or factor that we can all engage in, that we have complete control over, to mitigate and blunt those 5 diseases of aging, and therefore reducing that gap between health span and lifespan. It's protein pacing. It consists of 4 protein-paced meals a day, every 4 hours, ranging between 25 and 50 grams per meal. First meal within an hour of waking in the morning, and the last one within 2 hours of bedtime. So it's really about optimizing the type of the protein, number one, and we'll get to what that means, the amount, and then the timing. And the second component of this concept of protein pacing is, as I said, the nutritional fasting. And I usually have our scientific study participants do it 1 to 2 days per week during the time period of the actual study. That can range from 4 weeks all the way to 12 weeks, sometimes 16 weeks. If it needs to go longer, we adapt it to maybe reducing it to once or twice a month, not every week like we would during the scientific investigation. But it consists of a very similar pattern. It's 4 very nutritious, but very low calorie, but very nutrient dense feedings over the course of those 1 to 2 days of the nutritional fast. 2 days is better than 1 day. And so it's antioxidants, it's adaptogens, it's some collagen, it's some multivitamins that are very rich, again, in nutrient density, but very calorically low in calories. Okay. So what's happening to our body when we engage in this process of intermittent fasting? Just to go over this very quickly. Well, unfortunately, the majority of the population is what we would call sugar or carb burners, meaning they're burning primarily their carbohydrate stores. This is not ideal. We do not want to live in a state of sugar or carbohydrate burning, because that then preserves our body fat stores. So we need to transition from being a carb sugar burner into what I'm going to introduce next. So after we eat, we encompass this milieu inside of our blood, inside of our cells, that favors this carbohydrate burning, and fats are stored. During fasting, however, things begin to transition away from carbohydrates into burning more fats. And that's what we want to strive for, so that we can all become what are called fat burners. That's the ideal. So nutritional fasting allows us to do this. Now, this is a very complicated looking slide, so forget what's kind of around in the details. Let me just show you that if you were to consume a normal eating pattern, this upper bar of A that you see in front of you is showing that your glucose is constantly being perturbed and increased. That's not good. We don't want our glucose to keep being elevated throughout the day. So A is no good. Put a big X through that. B is what we want. B is where we begin to favorably change from that state of glucose into fat as our primary energy source. And you see that here, so that when people do go follow a 1 or 2 day nutritional fast, their body maintains and stabilizes with blood sugar at a very low level, as you see there in that middle graph here at B. Glucose is very flatlined, and the ketones, those are the things that we produce when our body transitions into burning more of our body fat stores begin to increase. That's actually a very healthy state. That's when the body really undergoes very healthy metabolic change and reduces our risk for the diseases of aging. So the sweet spot seems to appear right at about the 36-hour time period. I know it sounds really daunting for people, but it's not a complete fast, as most fasts recommend you do. We have shown scientifically that when you nurture and nourish the body with these healthy substances periodically during that 24-hour, preferably 36 to 60-hour period, it produces some extremely favorable health response. So turning our attention back to the protein pacing, so we have the nutritional fasting locked in, but what is it about the protein pacing that results in such favorable health benefit? Well, it's the quality of the protein, and what our lab has demonstrated time and time again over the past 40 years is that when we nourish our body with high quality protein in the form of what we call undenatured whey protein. I'm showing you just a typical whey protein shake that some people might drink in the morning. That is what is providing the body with optimal nourishment because of the amino acids that are contained within that undenatured whey protein. So you see it over here. This undenatured whey protein concentrate is filled with all of these very, very healthy components and compounds and amino acids that allow our metabolism to stay at a very, very healthy and high level. And that's the goal of what we want to achieve. We want to make sure that our metabolism is focusing its attention on those vital organs, the lungs, the heart, the brain, the muscles, and the optimal nourishment to allow us to do that is undenatured whey protein. Now, it doesn't only need to come from undenatured whey protein. We can also have other healthy food sources like grass-fed beef, wild-caught fish, pasture-raised eggs and dairy of foods of those types, and then non-GMO, for example, plant sources. Those would be the optimal. All of those that I just listed would be the optimal sources of proteins of the highest quality. But at the highest quality, I know everyone always wants to know, Dr. Paul, what is the highest quality? It's undenatured whey protein concentrate. That takes the #1 spot. All right, so let's move on now that we know that. What is the real issue at hand that's contributing to this, these diseases of aging? Well, it's excess body weight for the most part, and especially excess body fat that's contributing to the greatest disease risk. And I know these figures and these statistics that I'm presenting are, again, a little bit overwhelming. We see these all the time, but it's really important to address this because the environment, the culture, the current way we have of doing things is not making it better. I know we have some really advanced medical and pharmaceutical technologies and interventions that we're now using to help combat this problem of the 5 diseases of aging, but they're not attacking the problem at its root cause. They're still offering what we would call an advanced Band-Aid approach. That's what these current pharmaceuticals are currently doing. I'm not suggesting that they're bad. I'm just suggesting that they're not addressing the root cause of what's contributing to the 5 diseases of aging, especially the metabolic and cardiovascular diseases of aging. So let's dive into this. Let's see where we are at. So the current pharmaceutical drug interventions, they're called GLP-1s, GLP, glucagon-like polypeptide 1 agonist drugs, GLP-1s, many of you are familiar with. They are somewhat of an alternative to intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating. And here's what we have. Here's what we know currently. These are 2 studies that were published in world-leading medical journals, by the way. And what they showed was that over 68 weeks and in 12 weeks, 68 weeks was the GLP-1 study, 12 weeks was the IF, time-restricted eating study. They showed that these were people with BMIs, that's a body mass index, that was placing them at increased risk for disease. So they needed an intervention. They lost a good amount of weight, at least in the GLP group, 30 pounds. They lost only 18 pounds, so only about half of what they lost of their weight was fat loss. Guess what? Well, the answer is right in front of you. The other remaining weight that they were losing was their lean body mass. Now, you should all be having a light bulb that's going off all around your head and saying, wow, you just told us, Dr. Paul, that's not good. We don't want to lose our lean body mass. You're exactly right. We do not. So we need to intervene with these GLP-1s that are massively being used right now to help circumvent these problems of these diseases of aging, and intervene and try to help assist them or provide another alternative, because they're not cutting it right now. They're not providing the optimal health response. This is a massive hit to our health, both of these. So what we've done is conducted our own studies using protein pacing and nutritional fasting. And as you can see, with the same BMI, as you see there in that second row going across, these were people that had the same disease risk, but look at this, their weight was 26 pounds, 21 of which was their fat mass. So a significantly larger of weight that they were losing was their fat mass. And guess what? That means that their lean body mass was being more preserved. And in terms of their overall percentage of lean body mass, it went up by 9%, 9% increase. So we followed that up with a second study of a slightly shorter duration, and that's the one I'm going to highlight for the remaining time period that I have here with you today. We did a shorter study using the protein pacing nutritional fasting that was of 8 weeks, but we were looking at the effects that it had, not just on their body composition and their hormone levels, but also their gut microbiome. We wanted to see what was happening when people followed a protein pacing nutritional fasting protocol on what was happening with their gut microbiome. So before we get there, here's what happened with a 1-year follow-up. We were showing the dotted line that you see on both of these graphs is the protein pacing nutritional fasting. And when we followed these people up for a 1-year time period after, they had a continued increase in their lean body mass percentage. You see that in this first figure right here. That's an amazing finding that after 12 months, they continued to increase their percentage of lean body mass compared to a group that was following a heart-healthy Mediterranean style diet. So again, we need to make what we currently have as solutions better. And that's where protein pacing and nutritional fasting comes in. Here's the change in abdominal fat. Now, why that's so problematic is because it contributes to the 5 diseases of aging. We know that when we increase fat accumulation around our midsection, our waist, it increases our risk for the 5 diseases of aging significantly. So if there's one change that we can strive to change, it's not even loss of body weight, to be honest with you. I know we all focus on our body weight. It's more about what we lose around our midsection in terms of body fat mass. So maintaining weight and sometimes even increasing weight is not a bad thing when you are on a journey to increasing your health, as long as you're reducing the waist circumference. And if lean body mass is increasing, that's a bonus. So this one is showing significant continued after 1 year loss. But as you see here, the heart healthy group had a continued increase of the fat accumulation around their midsection. Same here with diabetes risk. So the visceral fat also decreased by 1/3. Glucose, that's the blood sugar, decreased. That means they were becoming less of a carb sugar burner. That's good. And then their insulin, that's the hormone that's responsible for shuttling the sugar into the cells, also decreased by 41%. That's an incredible reduction. All right, one of the other things that we measure is toxicity response. And so we measure toxins, and people look at this slide. That's the first bar graph that you see here. Toxins actually go up, but that's actually a good thing, because that means that's the first step of what we call mobilization of toxins in the body. You first need to mobilize them. And the first place that they get mobilized into is the blood. Now, if this was a dangerous response, we would see something called cellular stress or cellular damage increase, or oxidative damage. And actually, we showed a decrease of 25%. So not only were the toxins being mobilized, which is the first step, which is good, but the damage that was occurring inside the body and the cells of the body decreased by 25%. And the body's own defense system against those stressful toxins actually went up 5%. This slide I love because it paints the picture of absolute optimal health improvement when you follow protein pacing and nutritional fasting. So I want to just move into the gut microbiome. This study was published in Nature Communications. It's a world-leading journal in the world. And just to finish up the topic here. So we took a totally different group of 40 men and women, divided them into a protein pacing nutritional fasting group, 20. And then we had another group that followed the heart healthy Mediterranean. 19 of them followed that. And after 8 weeks, here's what we found. We found that their gut microbes, the gut microbes, increased in diversity by 25% compared to the group that was following the heart healthy Mediterranean. Both groups had an improvement in their diversity. And by the way, gut microbe diversity is healthy. We find that people who have the least diversity of their gut microbes are the least healthy. They're more at risk for diabetes, more at risk for heart disease, more at risk for toxin-related inflammatory conditions and cancers, neurocognitive decline, musculoskeletal issues. So whenever we reduce the diversity inside of our gut, diseases of aging skyrocket. When we increase the diversity, diseases of aging plummet. And what you're seeing in here in front of you is an absolute flourishing of gut microbes in both groups, but the greatest increase in the diversity. Think about a beautiful botanical garden. The greatest diversity occurred in the protein pacing nutritional fasting group, 25% more than the heart healthy Mediterranean. That's unbelievable. I mean, just so exciting. I'm so thrilled to be able to share that. These are a little bit more of the nuanced details of the specific gut microbe species that increased. And you can see by the illumination of the color. So if you look here, IFP stands for the nutritional fasting protein pacing. We called it intermittent fasting because that's what most people know it by. So if you look at 4 weeks and 8 weeks, look at the color. Look at these beautiful colors of orange and red and blue, pinks. Those all at 4 and 8 weeks were so much brighter than here. CR stands for the Mediterranean Heart Healthy diet group. Theirs are very bland, not much color going on there whatsoever. So the color variation in the protein pacing nutritional fasting was off the charts. They had a huge increase. Some of the inflammatory markers that also contribute to the diseases of aging flourished in some cases that were healthy and decreased in some cases in only the protein pacing nutritional fasting group compared to the heart healthy Mediterranean. So here again, these blood markers, not only did the gut microbiome markers improve drastically more in the protein pacing nutritional fasting, but also these blood markers of inflammatory response that are associated with diabetes, heart disease, inflammation, neurodegenerative decline, musculoskeletal inflammation, osteoarthritis, and things like that, changed for the better. They became more beneficial in the protein pacing nutritional fasting group. It was amazing when we saw the whole host of changes that were occurring favorably in the protein pacing nutritional fasting group at a higher level. Both groups have remarkable, benefit, but the degree to which they changed more favorably in the protein pacing nutritional fasting was significantly greater. So as I showed you with the previous study where we showed a significant 33% reduction in visceral fat over 12 weeks, we duplicated that in 8 weeks. That was what was so exciting. When we've had these individuals nutritional fast for 2 days a week compared to only 1 in the previous study, they were able to in a much shorter period of time, where the previous study, if they nutritionally fasted 1 day a week, it took them 12 weeks to get it to a 33% reduction in their visceral fat reduction. In this study, in 8 weeks, they achieved the same 33% reduction. And look at this, the Heart Healthy Mediterranean had a 16% reduction. So that's phenomenal. But when you compare it to the protein pacing nutritional fasting, 33%, it was a doubling, even better. So one of the things that we do is, not only do we like to have the really objective internal measures of improvement that were occurring in the gut microbiome, in the blood, in the body fat mass, but also their self-reported complaints. what we demonstrated is that the people that were following the protein pacing nutritional fasting had a 3 times greater reduction in stomach complaint reports. That's amazing. So incredible data. What we had was one study participant. We did a case study, and I'm going to finish up with this. So it's so incredible. We followed this individual because at the end of the 8-week time period, he had a 1 pound loss of body fat per day. So he had a massive reduction. In those 56 days, he had a 53-pound weight reduction. Now, most people would say, that can't be healthy. Well, it was, because every marker of health and disease of aging plummeted or improved in this case. So he had a massive increase, and you can see that here. His increase in his gut microbes increased drastically. Here's a graphic of it as well. You can see how the ones that we don't want to have increase all decrease, but the ones that we do want to have increase all increase. That's what the different colors mean and how they moved. I know it's a busy slide, but take my word for it. You can read it in the published paper. He had an incredibly drastic and significant improvement in his gut microbiome. And here's his statistics to finish up my presentation today. He started at 359 pounds. He finished at 255. His body fat plummeted downward. His waist circumference, he lost 14 inches. 14 inches. I'll say it again. You see the picture here. This is the day the week before he started, and this was the day he finished. Okay. This was in 4 months, because we followed him out for a couple of years, but these were his 4-month data. His blood sugar, he was a diabetic, went from 141 to 85. His blood pressure, he was hypertensive, went from 146/98 to 99/75. So these are the conclusions, or those were the conclusions, just as I said, but I want to just be sensitive to time. So I want to stop my screen share, and thank you all for being here today. I hope that was lively, engaging, and educational and informative. And thanks again for joining me on my talk today.